Be a huge victory for Johnny Depp this morning.
Yeah, a major setback for women inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom.
Because?
Because basically what this said, Amber had an enormous amount of evidence, although a lot of it was suppressed in this case as opposed to the UK. But look at all the women who have no evidence. All these women who suffer from domestic violence, domestic abuse, they don't have evidence. And basically what this jury said is unless you pull out your cell phone and you tape record your spouse beating you, you're out of luck.
But Elaine, I think it was bigger than that because you had the evidence, as you say, but they did not believe her. Why do you think they did not believe her?
I think that a lot of that was that it was Johnny Depp. I think the celebrity status.
But she's a celebrity too.
And it's not only not believing her.
But she's a celebrity too.
Right.
But you have to.
What you do as an abuse victim, you always have to do more. You need to be perfect in order for people to believe you. If she did not get a favorable verdict, what message do you think this sends?
It's a horrible message. It's, as I said, a setback. It's a significant setback because that's exactly what it means. Unless you pull out your phone and you video your spouse or your significant other beating you, effectively, you won't be believed.
Elaine Charlson, Bretta Hoff, thank you very much for your time this morning. I've ever covered or ever seen, social media was a part of this. And it was incredibly lopsided and vitriolic against Amber Heard. Do you think that had an effect on the case?
Absolutely.
You think jurors were aware of it? They weren't supposed to be. They're admonished every single day. Don't look at it. Do you think they did see it?
How can you not? They went home every night. They have families. The families are on social media. We had a 10-day break in the middle because of the judicial conference. There's no way they couldn't have been influenced by it. And it was horrible. It really, really was lopsided. And I appreciate your saying that. It's like the Roman Colosseum, how they viewed this whole case. I was against cameras in the courtroom, and I went on record with that and had argued against it because of the sensitive nature of this. But it made it a zoo.
Does your client want to appeal?
Oh, absolutely. And she has some excellent grounds for it. We even had tried to get the UK judgment in to dismiss his case because he already had his shot. And that's one of the issues, but also a number of the evidentiary issues. There was so much evidence that did not come in.
Is she able to pay a $10.4 million?
Op-ed never even mentioned Mr. Depp. You have to remember that. What they learned from the UK case is to demonize Amber, which is what they did, and to try to suppress as much of the evidence that came in the UK and did not come in the United States. But the other problem is we had cameras in the courtroom. So here we had, not only did we have a group of Depp fans that were there every day, 100 were allowed in. They lined up at 1 o'clock in the morning for their wristbands to be in that courtroom. But we had everything on camera, and we had tremendous social media that was very, very, very much against Amber.
It was pointed out that that was the first time that a victim of sexual abuse had to testify on live television.
And I fought hard and lost that battle. It should not have happened.
So I am a former.
Though, that this jury, for whatever reason, and I hear you on some of the evidence that they didn't hear, listening to Amber Heard, did not believe a single word.
And that's because she was demonized here. A number of things were allowed in this court that should not have been allowed. And it caused the jury to be confused. We weren't allowed to tell them about the UK judgment. So the damages is completely skewed. There are no damages. It stopped at November 2, 2020, which is when the judgment came down in the UK.
Let me ask you about social media in this.
It seemed to be so messy and salacious and so tawdry on both sides. And I think a lot of people from the outside looking in thought both of them were not telling the truth and that they mutually abused each other. Do you not believe that that was the case?
No, and that's one of the many misnomers. The way that Depp's team approached this was based on ignorance of domestic violence. It completely ignored the cycle of violence and just said, oh, she wouldn't have done this if he had been hitting her. That was their approach.
So you thought that they weren't fighting fair?
Correct. I don't think they were fighting fair.
And you think Amber Heard is, in fact, a survivor of domestic violence?
Yes, I absolutely believe that. And there's a tremendous amount of evidence, much of which did not come into this trial, did come into the UK trial. We even had more evidence. We had medical records. We had mental health records that went back to 2012 that were contemporaneous. We had text messages from Mr. Depp's assistant saying, when I told him that he had kicked you, he cried.
So how is she today, Elaine? How is she today? What is her next move?
She certainly had her testimony. There were pictures, documents, all kinds of evidence. But in point of fact, the jury rejected it. You argued in your closing arguments that if they found even one instance of abuse, and it did not even have to be physical abuse, that they would have to find for Amber Heard, and they didn't.
And the other part to bear in mind here is nothing changed. The op-ed didn't even mention Mr. Depp by name. And so what basically they did here is demonize her. And they were able to suppress the medical records, which were very, very significant because they showed a pattern going all the way back to 2012 of Amber reporting this to her therapist, for example. We had significant amount of texts, including from Mr. Depp's assistants, saying, when I told him he kicked you, he cried. He is so sorry. That didn't come in.
Is there any other way to interpret this verdict?
Trials, all the evidence came in the UK. Mr. Depp brought that one. The burden of proof was on the son in the UK because they had called him a wife beater and talked about the domestic violence. He had his opportunity to tell the truth then. And a 3-week trial, he lost. The judge found 12 acts of domestic violence, including sexual violence. And that came out November 2, 2020. We weren't allowed to tell the jury that.
Well, it's a different system, and the judge, it wasn't a jury, it was a judge. The judge said it was substantially true, and that is significant, and I think surprised a lot of legal analysts. But, you know, in this case, the jury not only didn't believe Amber Heard, but in ruling that she acted with actual malice, that means she had the intent to cause harm, right? That's a pretty high standard to have proven.
And it's pretty amazing since
Amber Heard. Are you stunned that the jury essentially rejected her story?
Well, you know, really what happened here is it's a tale of two trials. Johnny Depp brought a suit in the UK for the same case, and the burden of proof was easier for him there. The son had to actually prove that it was true, and the court found there, and we weren't allowed to tell the jury this, but the court found that Mr. Depp had committed at least 12 acts of domestic violence, including sexual violence, against Amber. So what did Depp's team learn from this? Demonize Amber and suppress the evidence. We had an enormous amount of evidence that was suppressed in this case that was in the UK case. In the UK case, when it came in, Amber won, Mr. Depp lost.
But here's the thing, you were...
Right, well, her next move is appeal. There were a number.
Heartbroken.
She is heartbroken. And one of the first things that she said when she came back from the verdict, when we went into the conference room, was, I am so sorry to all these women.
She said that?
Yes. She felt like she had let down all of these women because she had more evidence than most people do, and yet they still didn't believe her.
Elaine, Charleston, Bretta Hoff, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
First question, how is Amber doing? We saw her hearing that verdict. It took a long time to read. It was a sweeping verdict for Johnny Depp. How did she handle it?
You know, one of the first things she said is, I am so sorry to all those women out there. This is a setback for all women in and outside the courtroom. And she feels the burden of that.
Well, knowing the case and knowing the law.
And after a hard loss, it's easy to wake up and point to the other side. Oftentimes, I realized the better thing to do was to look in the mirror. What mistakes did I make as a player? What mistakes did our coaching staff make? And then how can we improve from there? Do you feel like you guys made any mistakes along the way? Do you feel like Amber made a mistake while she was on the stand? Because you're saying it's the celebrity, it's Johnny, it's the people who support him. But what about you and your team?
Well, and that's an excellent question. And to say, and you know, Amber even said on the stand, I am not perfect. I am a human being. These people were giving her death threats. They threatened to microwave her baby. This is the kind of social media she was getting. So are any of us perfect? No. Is there something else we feel we should have done? Yes, absolutely. I redo my closings 100 times afterwards, whether I win or lose. That's part of being a good lawyer, a good trial lawyer, is there's always something. But I think that there were a lot of influences here that were beyond our control. And I think the social media, it was like a Roman Colosseum. It is the best way to describe the atmosphere here. And I have to believe that the jury, even though they're told not to go and look at anything, they have weekends, they have families, they have
they were not
media.
Sequestered. They were not sequestered.
And the 10-day period we had, how could they not have been influenced?
But Elaine, for most people watching this trial, and a lot of